Manifest TV.
It is a beautiful Friday evening, the 17th of July 2026, and you're watching Christian Side Stories here on Manifest Television. Now in tonight's edition, the death toll in Venezuela passes 4,500. Operation Blessing brings hope to earthquake survivors. As Nigerian Christian leaders reject Trump's claim U.S. ended killings, and Tanzania turns to faith leaders to promote Turk's ethics and voluntary compliance. I'm Daphne Karungi Kangave with today's Christian Side Stories. We begin in Venezuela, where communities are struggling to recover after one of the deadliest earthquakes in the country's modern history. The disaster has now claimed more than 4,500 lives, leaving thousands injured and forcing countless families into temporary shelters. Entire neighborhoods have reportedly been reduced to rubble. Roads, bridges, schools, and medical facilities have suffered severe damage, making relief efforts especially difficult. Among the various international humanitarian organizations providing relief to victims, Christian relief ministries have become some of the earliest and most consistent responders. Among them is Operation Blessing. They have been deploying emergency teams to deliver food, clean drinking water, medical supplies, hygiene kits, blankets, and temporary shelter materials. For Christians watching around the world, this tragedy also serves as a reminder that the gospel is demonstrated not only through preaching but also compassionate actions. As Jesus himself declared in Matthew chapter 25, serving those in need is serving him. Let's take a look.
The death toll following the catastrophic recent earthquake has officially reached the grim milestone of 4,500 individuals. Infrastructure, already weakened by years of economic instability, has collapsed, leaving hundreds of thousands displaced without clean water, electricity, or medical aid. Yet, in the epicenter of this ruin, faith-based intervention is rewriting the narrative of despair. Operation Blessing, the international humanitarian arm of CBN, has deployed advanced disaster relief teams into the hardest hit sectors. Rather than offering superficial aid, their strategy focuses on deeper tier intervention, setting up long-term clean water purification systems, mobile surgical clinics, and micro-distribution networks for emergency food supplies. Yet, Operation Blessing's work extends beyond physical relief. Volunteers are providing trauma counseling, praying with grieving families, comforting children who have lost their parents, and partnering with local churches that remain operational despite suffering damage themselves. Brenda for Manifest TV.
We continue to pray for all those that have been affected by this earthquake. Now, our next story takes us to Nigeria, where Christian leaders have publicly challenged recent remarks by the U.S. President Donald Trump, saying claims that the U.S. has ended the killing of Christians in the country do not reflect the reality on the ground. Trump's comments were welcomed by some as a sign that the persecution of Christians remains on the international agenda. However, prominent Nigerian church leaders cautioned that while international attention is appreciated, the violence itself has by no means ended. They say Christians in many parts of northern and central Nigeria continue to face deadly attacks, displacement, kidnappings and destruction of churches and homes. Our scripture reminds us the church is one body. When one part suffers, every believer is called to stand with them, bearing one another's burdens and remembering those who face trials for the sake of Christ. Hebrews chapter 13 and verse 3 says, "Continue to remember those in prison as if you were in prison yourself, and those who are being mistreated as if you are mistreated."
Nigerian Christian leaders have formally and decisively rejected public assertions made by US President Donald Trump, who claimed that his administration's foreign policy directly brought an end to the systematic killing of Christians in Nigeria. Leaders representing the Christian Association of Nigeria and various ecclesiastical bodies across the Middle Belt region have issued detailed pushbacks. They assert that the political rhetoric coming out of the United States completely misrepresents the bloody reality on the ground. Statistics from indigenous human rights trackers show that ethno-religious violence, sophisticated farm invasions by militant herdsmen, and targeted kidnappings of clergy in states like Kaduna, Plateau, and Borno have not ceased, but have instead morphed into more complex insurgencies. One of the recurring concerns raised by Nigerian Christian leaders is that the international community often focuses on headline-grabbing incidents, while overlooking the persistent, low-level violence that continues to claim lives week after week. A single attack may not dominate global news, but over months and years, these incidents accumulate into a humanitarian and religious freedom crisis affecting hundreds of communities. Treasure Zawila, Manifest TV.
Our prayers keep with Nigeria. We now move to neighboring Tanzania, where the government is looking beyond traditional tax enforcement and embracing an unlikely but influential partner, the church. The Tanzania Revenue Authority, or TRA, has launched an initiative to work with faith leaders across the country to encourage tax ethics and voluntary tax compliance. Rather than relying solely on audits, penalties, or legal enforcement, the government hopes religious leaders can help foster a culture in which paying taxes is viewed not just as a legal obligation, but as a moral responsibility. The initiative recognizes a simple but profound reality. In many African societies, religious leaders often command greater trust than government institutions. Week after week, millions of Tanzanians gather in churches and mosques where pastors and religious leaders speak not only about religious matters, but also about integrity, justice, stewardship, and responsible citizenship. The government believes those same platforms can help address one of the persistent economic challenges, which is tax evasion. Jesus reminds us in Matthew chapter 22, verse 21, "Give back to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God's."
In East Africa, the government of Tanzania is deploying an unprecedented strategy to reform its domestic economy, turning directly to religious institutions to tackle tax evasion and build civil responsibility. The Tanzania Revenue Authority has formally partnered with prominent faith leaders, both Christian and Islamic, to promote tax ethics and encourage voluntary compliance from the pulpit. Instead of framing tax compliance merely as a financial issue, the TRA is appealing to ethical teachings shared by religious communities. Faith leaders are being encouraged to remind their congregations that honesty extends beyond personal relationships into public life. Declaring one's income truthfully, refusing corruption, and contributing fairly to society can all be expressions of integrity. Brenda for Manifest TV.
The story takes us into a short commercial break.
Make manifest.
In our way of faith, there are things that are or could be demanded by heaven as a response to your faith in God, and some of which might not be conducive. Some things will provoke you to leave your status, to leave your credibility, to leave your positioning, to leave whatever crown you have, because God wants to launch you deeper in places of access concerning His purpose. Be broken and flexible enough to do what God desires. Don't ever let anything you have on your life to discourage you or separate you from the perfect will of God concerning your life. Never be offended where you know this is a response to your faith.
Manifest TV, Christ revealed.
Let it shine! You put in the hours to make your brand the greatest. You go the extra mile to allow it achieve success. It deserves to be treated the right way, to be given the attention it deserves, and not stay in the dark. Advertise with Manifest Television to get your brand into the light. Manifest TV, Christ revealed.
Welcome back. Thank you for choosing Manifest Television, Christian Side Stories. Moving on, Anglican leaders have unveiled an ambitious vision to plant 1 million new churches over the coming decades, with Africa expected to play a central role in making that vision a reality. The announcement reflects a profound transformation that has been unfolding quietly for more than a century. Well, Anglicanism was once viewed primarily as a church rooted in England and spread through British missionary activity. Its demographic herd has now shifted decisively to the global south. Today, some of the largest and fastest growing Anglican provinces are not found in Europe or North America, but in countries such as Nigeria, Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, Rwanda, and South Sudan. This changing landscape has fundamentally altered the balance of influence within the Anglican Communion. African churches are no longer simply recipients of missionary work. They are becoming some of the world's most active missionary sending churches. Matthew chapter 28 and verse 19 to 20 records Jesus' final commission to his disciples. Therefore, go make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And surely I'm with you always to the end of the age. We take a look.
The Anglican Communion has launched a breathtaking long-term global vision to plant 1 million new churches across the globe. What makes this initiative profoundly historic is its engine. The vision is being decisively shaped, resourced, and driven by the exploding Christian population of Africa. For centuries, global missions flowed from the global west to the rest of Anglican Future Conference, or GAFCON, are exporting a robust, spiritually conservative theology back into the Western nations that originally brought them to the gospel. Brenda for Manifest TV.
We now move to Pakistan, where senior government officials have made an extraordinary admission that is reigniting debate over one of the country's most controversial laws. Pakistani officials have acknowledged that most blasphemy cases brought before authorities appear to be fabricated. with many accusations driven not by genuine religious offenses, but by personal vendettas, property disputes, financial conflicts, or attempts to intimidate vulnerable individuals. The admission is significant because Pakistani's blasphemy laws carry some of the harshest penalties in the world. Under the country's penal code, offenses relating to insulting Islam, the Quran, or the Prophet Muhammad can result in lengthy prison sentences, life imprisonment, and in certain cases, the death penalty. For Pakistan's Christian minority, which makes up roughly 2% of the country's population, the consequences can be devastating. Human rights organizations have long documented cases in which Christians have been falsely accused following disagreements with neighbors, employers, business partners, or local influential figures. Even when courts eventually dismiss the cases, the damage is often irreversible. Families are forced into hiding, churches require police protection, homes are attacked by angry mobs, and entire Christian communities sometimes flee their villages for fear of retaliation. Proverbs chapter 19 and verse 5 declares, "A false witness will not go unpunished, and whoever pours out lies will not go free."
A stunning and rare admission from state officials is shedding a harsh light on the plight of minority believers. In Pakistan, legal and judicial officials have openly conceded that the overwhelming majority of blasphemy cases brought under the nation's controversial penal code are entirely fabricated. For decades, Pakistan's strict blasphemy laws, specifically sections 295B and 295C, have carried severe penalties, including life imprisonment and the death penalty. However, this fresh, in-depth look by legal authorities confirms what human rights groups have long argued. These laws are systematically weaponized to settle personal vendettas, seize real estate, or target vulnerable Christian minorities. Treasure Zawila, Manifest TV.
I'll move to the United States, where tributes are pouring in following the death of U.S. Senator Lindsey Graham, a veteran lawmaker from South Carolina, who died suddenly at the age of 71 after what his office described as a brief illness. While Senator Graham was one of America's most recognizable political figures, known for his influential role in the U.S. foreign policy and national security, many Christian organizations are remembering him for another aspect of his public life: his consistent advocacy for persecuted Christians and international religious freedom. Throughout his more than 2 decades in the U.S. Senate, Graham frequently used his position to draw attention to Christians facing violation, imprisonment, and discrimination across the Middle East, Africa, and Asia. Proverbs chapter 31 and verse 8 to 9 reminds us, "Speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves, for the rights of all who are destitute. Speak up and judge."
Veteran South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham, a towering and often polarizing figure in American politics, has died at the age of 71. Beyond his widely covered work on domestic judicial appointments and hawkish foreign policy, Graham was known within international Christian circles as a fierce, highly strategic advocate for persecuted believers worldwide. Throughout his extensive legislative career in the U.S. Senate, Graham consistently leveraged his high-ranking positions on foreign relations and appropriations committees to tie American foreign aid directly to the treatment of religious minorities. Whether speaking about ISIS's atrocities against Christians in Iraq and Syria, attacks by Boko Haram and other extremist groups in Nigeria, or the plight of believers imprisoned under authoritarian regimes, Graham argued that religious persecution should remain a priority in American foreign policy. Treasure Zawila, Manifest TV.
May you continue to rest in power. Did you know that strawberries are actually not berries? but a watermelon is. Raspberries, strawberries, and blackberries aren't true berries. The scientific definition of a berry is a plant that has three distinctive layers: an outer skin, exocarp, a fleshy middle, mesocarp, and here is the key: internally contained seeds, endocarp. So, because these seeds are not on the outside, those fruits aren't berries. However, watermelon, bananas, grapes, and eggplants are all technically berries. There you go. You know a new thing. And that brings us to the end of today's edition of Christian Side Stories. Today's headlines have reminded us that even in a world that is marked by tragedy, persecution, and uncertainty, God continues to work through his people. From churches bringing relief to earthquake survivors in Venezuela to believers standing firm amid persecution in Nigeria and Pakistan to Africa's growing role in global missions, we are reminded that Christ is faithfully building his church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. I will leave you with the words of Galatians chapter 6 and verse 9. Let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time you will reap a harvest that is bountiful. Well, that is Daphne for you with today's Christian Side Stories here on the Manifest Television. We love you so much. Don't go anywhere. Keep with us and have a good night.
Manifest TV, Christ revealed.